My name's Kim and I'm the founder of The Social Child. So The Social Child is basically aimed at empowering parents and equipping them with the tools and strategies they need to help their child who might be struggling with bullying or that might be struggling with building their social skills. When I was younger, I was actually bullied quite badly. It was during my primary school years. I was probably in year 5, so I was about 10 years old, and the girls that I'd been friends with since kindergarten suddenly turned on me, and they made my life pretty hard work for 12 to 18 months there. I was pushed to the ground, kicked, tormented like you wouldn't believe, and on top of that, at the same time, and during that time I lost all my friends. No one would spend time with me purely because they were too scared to. In my street where I grew up, I had a bunch of children that were also making my life quite difficult. So even when I got home from school, I had these other kids that would sit on the retaining wall of our house and cause a lot of drama for me. Also at the same time, I actually had family members that were kind of like brothers to me, but they would constantly make fun of my weight. And so it ended up being a compound of all of those things that really made me come undone. And by the time I hit high school, I really struggled to maintain friendships because I didn't really trust anyone. So it meant that I would bounce from group to group, or I would have one friend in each group, and I would just sort of hang around with whoever it was that I wanted to at the time. But I never really built those strong friendships, those solid friendships because of that. At the time, going through high school and my early adult years, I didn't really realize that there was an issue. If people upset me, if a friend upset me, I'd simply just move on. And I didn't realize that wasn't the way to deal with something. Knowing now that what you do is to work through it and then build on that friendship and make it stronger. But for me, it was just the flight mode. I would take off. That was it. I couldn't deal with any kind of conflict. So because of that, I really came out of high school with maybe 1 or 2 friends, but not really any solid friendships. I went off to uni, moved out of home and went off to uni a couple of hours away. And it was while I was at uni that things started to really come undone. I was already a very emotional person. And so I became more emotional, crying for no reason. And when friends would come over, sometimes I'd just be a crying mess, and I'd say, I'll be okay in a minute, I'm just a bit upset. And there was no reason for me to really be upset. So it actually wasn't until one of my friends actually said to me that she thinks that I might need some help, that I'm obviously not dealing with something. And that was when I went to see a psychologist. It sent me then on a path looking for answers, looking for why I was feeling so down about myself, because at that point I'd hit such a low that I didn't know how to get myself out of it. I started reading self-help books, trying to find reasons that as to why there was something wrong with me in the way that I was behaving, why I was so emotional. I just didn't understand. And we started doing some digging to work out why I couldn't handle big amounts of conflict, why whenever someone would bring up what had happened to me in primary school, I would just fall into a ball of a mess, bawling my eyes out, and almost to the point where I couldn't even talk about it. the phases of recovery for me were, I started off really emotional and struggling to hold on to those friendships. And then when I started seeing the psychologist, they helped me to move through the trauma that was what had happened to me. I don't know if you've seen the movie Inside Out, but that is a great movie for kids to watch in order to understand what's happening in the brain. Because once I started doing some research on how the brain works, it's very, very similar to how they've explained it to kids in that movie. And so what I had to do was actually move all of my memories about the bullying, which I was still holding on to and still feeling and living the trauma of. I had to move it from my short-term memory to my long-term memory. And that was a massive process. There was a lot of therapy that I went through. I was seeing the psychologist at the start once a week. And as I got better, it sort of went out to once a month, and then so on and so on. So what I did was I moved the trauma of what had happened to me into my long-term memory, into storage. And so whenever I talk about it now, I don't get those emotions coming up with it. So once I'd sort of started to deal with that, once I'd started moving it over to my long-term memory and could actually cope with what was happening, or what had happened to me, I then went through a real anger phase. So I was angry at the people that had those bullying behaviors and had treated me like that. But I was also very angry with my parents because unfortunately, at the time of being bullied, my parents didn't know how to deal with it. They didn't know how to cope. My dad's way of coping was to punch them in the face and get over it, basically. And for me, I couldn't just get over it. It wasn't something I could just get over. I was living it every day and not moving past it. And so I held a lot of anger and resentment towards my parents for a while there, because I felt like they didn't do enough to support me. I felt like they didn't do enough to save me from what happened. So I had to talk through that with them. I had to go to them and I had to explain why I was angry with them and ask them what did they do, because my memory was that they didn't do anything. They came up and spoke to the principal, and the principal didn't believe me either. So that was sort of a dead end. So Mum and I talked through it quite a lot, and we came out the other side. I came out the other side feeling like I'd moved past the anger and past what had happened to me. So I could suddenly talk about what had happened without the emotions. I could suddenly build friendships and maintain those friendships and deal with any conflicts that happened with them. And that was fine. I became so self-aware of myself that if I met someone new and their personality was something that would trigger me or was similar to that of the girls that had been so awful to me, I was able to notice that, be aware of that, be kind and be nice, but never form a big friendship with that person, because I knew that was a triggering personality for me. I still have moments of insecurity, but because I'm so self-aware, I'm able to work through that a lot better. And I think that's what's given me my strength. That's what's made me a stronger person. I'm very self-compassionate, and I'm also very sensitive to others' feelings as well. So I tend to be the friend that people come to if they're dealing with their own emotions, because I understand it and I understand how to work them through that now. So yes, I think that I have become a stronger person, but I also know things that may trigger me or get me upset, and I'm aware of that and I work through that if I need to. So if you're being bullied, it's very tough because every bullying situation is so different, and every person who's a victim of bullying has a different personality. So the tips that I can probably give you is the obvious ones that everyone gives you. Ignore the bullying behavior. And I understand that this doesn't always work. So if this doesn't work, you could try avoiding the person who is displaying those bullying behaviors, and stay away from them if you can. Again, I understand that doesn't always work as well, but there is something else you could do. It's called fogging. So fogging is basically agreeing with what the bullying, the person that's showing those bullying behaviors is saying. So if they're calling you fat, for example, maybe you could say, yeah, I am, I'm trying to lose it, or yeah, I am, and I'm okay with that. Or if they say you have an ugly face, you can say, yeah, I know, just to try and catch them off guard. There is statistics to show that does work, because they're not getting the rise out of you, they're not upsetting you if you're agreeing with them, and that can sometimes work, especially if you've got an audience that's surrounding you when this is all going down. If you're not showing that it's upsetting you, then there's nothing really to watch. It's quite boring. So people tend to get bored of that and walk away. And if someone with bullying behaviors doesn't have their audience, then they tend to not continue bullying. The other thing that you can do is to speak out. Go and speak to a teacher or your parents to try and come up with some ideas and strategies with them as to how to prevent it. But really, if you are, or if your child is going through bullying, the best thing that parents can do is, first of all, not emotionally react. Because if you react and you go up to the school or you approach the person that's doing the bullying, this can have not only a larger effect for the child that's going through it, but it can also damage the trust between you and your child. Your child's reaching out and telling you something that's happening. If you go off the handle and trying to protect them, basically, it can actually go the other way, and then in the future they may not come and talk to you about the situation that's happening. And that's why you need to make sure as a parent that you have that constant communication with your child, to make sure that you have that relationship with your child so that they do feel comfortable to come and talk to you about it. And that will help with cyberbullying as well. So if your child feels comfortable enough to talk to you about what's happening online, then that's a massive step forward in starting to work out some strategies to help them get past that. You could get them involved with activities outside of the environment where the child is that's showing those bullying behaviors. So get them involved in activities to help them build confidence in another area. That if they can build the confidence doing other activities, they might be able to take that confidence into the situation that's happening and move past the bullying themselves. Unfortunately, the hard thing is that for parents, there's not a lot you can do in terms of stopping the bullying right then and there. It's something that the victim, your child, needs to work through to find the strength to stop what's happening. So yeah, it's important to really build on that communication and relationship with your child, so that they feel comfortable enough to come and talk to you, and then you can take what you know with your child to either the school and have a meeting, or work out at home what strategies and tools that you can use to help them. If all else fails, don't feel like you're a failure for needing to seek professional help. That was one little bit that I actually went through when I started seeing a psychologist. I actually felt like a failure, that I couldn't look after myself and that I couldn't deal with what was happening on my own. I had to get help. And so there was a time where I actually felt a bit like a failure in myself, and it took me a little while to get past that. And so that's what I want to pass on to parents, is that you're not a failure if your child needs to talk to someone else. It may be that they need to talk to someone else to get a different perspective on the situation.